boy, this episode is going to get me a lot of flack, and 10-year-old me would not have even known why. For those who do not know, Magneto, or Max Eisenhart, or Eric Lenscher, is one of, if not the, primary antagonist of the X-Men, a Marvel comic book team of mutants that on surface level is just actiony superhero fun, but on deeper levels deals with social commentary, with mutants being used as an XP for groups facing systemic oppression, whether it be race, religion, gender, or sexuality, with a couple of mutants having differing views on how to handle this. Professor Charles Xavier advocates for mutants and humans to coexist peacefully, while Eric Lenscher believes that humanity should suffer the way they have made mutants suffer, as Eric is a survivor of one of the most horrible forms of oppression that happened in modern history, and refuses to go through it again. Now, Magneto is a very popular character, and it is very obvious why. He's a very interesting, well-written, and to an extent, sympathetic character. But it seems he's a little too interesting, well-written, and sympathetic, as we have been seeing a lot of people now just openly doing apologetics for Magneto and his actions. And all of you are completely wrong. Magneto is a bad guy. Like, I didn't think I would need to remind you all, but Magneto is a bad guy. The first thing I want to say, just immediately get out of the way, is every single person who is sympathetic to Magneto, everybody who posts like a tweet thread saying, oh, Magneto's so cool and based and blah, blah, blah. You do know he would kill you, right? Like you're a human. You are a human. He does not like humans. Magneto is a mutant supremacist who created an ethno-state for mutants, who commits acts of terrorism on humanity. Like, that's what he does. That's what he does in every comic he's in. His whole spiel is that mutants are genetically superior to humans, and as such, they are a second class of citizens, or they should be flat out eradicated due to actions that they took against the mutants. He's supposed to be the yin to Robert Kelly's yang. Robert Kelly advocates that mutants are evil and gross, and Magneto does the same for humans. And the X-Men are supposed to be fighting for peaceful coexistence among them. Like, that's what you're supposed to get from the books. These guys are the dangerous radicals. Meanwhile, these guys are the heroes because they reach across the aisle. But Magneto only goes after the bad humans. Yeah, and Robert Kelly goes after only the bad mutants. The problem is, they think that all of them are the bad. During the Fatal Attraction story arc, after Magneto creates another mutant ethno-state in Space Avalon, the UN Security Council creates a wave of satellites to create magnetic disruption fields that would prevent Magneto from coming to Earth. Magneto then decides to unleash an EMP that turns off every single electronic on Earth. Do you really think he only targeted the bad humans? You don't turn off an entire area's electricity only to target a specific subsection of people. You're doing it to target everybody. Like, it is super obvious what the intention of said action is. The only way you can claim that it is targeting bad people is if you are collectively saying all people in that area are bad. Which, in my humble opinion, sounds pretty genocidal to me. And many other adaptations of him have done a lot to show that he's not really a good person. In the X-Men film series, Mystique is one of Eric's most loyal followers, doing so much for him, his right hand throughout basically the entirety of their endeavors. The X-Men film franchise tying their relationship even closer, to the point where in X3, there's the mutant cure, and then one of the people are about to give the mutant cure to Magneto, and then Mystique takes the bullet for him, essentially doing the ultimate sacrifice. And what does he do? He just leaves her, because Mystique is no longer part of the group that Magneto deems as the superior race. Another thing that shows this is his sort of relationship with the X-Men. He views the X-Men as essentially race traitors because they do not believe in mutant supremacy, and thus, they are his enemies just as much as Kelly is. Magneto is sort of a living embodiment of the fear of retribution, the dark path people fall down when they have been oppressed for so long, they turn to violence. But that does get me thinking, Why are there so many other people who have a vastly different interpretation to Magneto? Again, not even just looking at him as an interesting character, but openly just sympathizing with him. Well, I think it boils down to 3 reasons. 1, misinterpreting sympathetic villains as redeemable villains. Magneto's past as a Holocaust survivor is very much written with the intention of making him sympathetic, not only in the fact that you feel bad for him, but you also kind of get why he feels the way he does. Again, he's a survivor of one of the most horrific genocides in modern history. It's not surprising that Magneto feels the way he does due to the suppression that he's faced by men. And to a lot of people, when you add depth to a character, they become more sympathetic. But the more sympathetic they become, and that leads to a lot of people to either speculate or interpret redemption where it doesn't exist. I've seen this a lot, especially recently, where a villain is written with depth, written with a sympathetic backstory, written with anything remotely indicative of them being more than just a mustache-twirling bad guy. And then we see people either get mad that they could possibly face a redemption arc, or people who have already put in their mind this character will get a redemption arc, so they might as well start supporting them now before the show makes you want to support them. When all that really is done is that the character is portrayed more roundly than you would think. Excuse me, but in this specific comic book, Magneto was redeemed. I hear you typing in the comments. And yeah, that's still fair to an extent. Magneto's existed for over 60 years. The writing has shifted a lot in that time period. Most comic book characters have gone through a major character shift in their time periods. But do we think that every single rewrite and retelling and interpretation of a character is good? Remember the time they turned Hal Jordan into a genocidal maniac? Or the time they turned Starfire into a boring sex object?
Or remember the time Marvel had Magneto team up with the Red Skull? Which led to so much backlash that Marvel had to create a separate comic storyline where Red Skull point blank says him and Magneto are no different. Do you think that interpretation of the character was good?
And how long until this specific interpretation of a character just reverts back to normal? It's not that Magneto can't be redeemed, because no singular human being is completely beyond the pale. Everyone has the chance of redemption, but not everybody chooses the path of redemption. Stan Lee didn't believe that redemption was impossible, as quoted in a 1969 interview. One of the things we try to demonstrate in our yarns is that nobody is all good or all bad. Even a shoddy supervillain can have a redeeming trait, just as any Howlin' hero might have his nutty hang-ups. One of the greatest barriers to real peace and justice in this troubled world is the feeling that everyone on the other side of the ideological fence is a bad guy. He acknowledges there can be redemption, but still calls them shoddy supervillains. Jack Kirby was also quoted as saying, "I knew villains had to come from somewhere, and they come from people. My villains were people that developed problems." They acknowledge Eric was once a good-hearted person, but corrupted by a cruel world. The second reason is simply misinformation. Especially among people on the political left, one of the big reasons why they like Magneto and sympathize with him is simply being told a complete lie about a vital aspect of the dichotomy of Professor X and Magneto, and that is the insinuation that they are based on Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, and the original run of the X-Men was based on the civil rights movement of Black Americans. It's especially funny hearing it now, considering who the actual dichotomy of these two is based on, with prominent X-Men writer Chris Claremont saying that the dichotomy between these two is actually based on Israeli politicians David Ben-Gurion and Menachem Begin, and the original run being based on anti-Semitism. And for those who do not know, Begin's party was described by Albert Einstein as a political party closely akin in its organization, methods, political philosophy, and social appeal to the Nazi and fascist parties. And in the 70s and 80s, the party would be reformed into a party that we know today as Likud, which, right now, is committing a genocide of their own, justifying it by past oppression. To claim that Magneto and Malcolm X are comparable would also be the equivalent of saying Menachem and Malcolm X are comparable. And are you guys really going to make that comparison? The civil rights comparisons of the X-Men comics came later as the expansion of people who are oppressed got more noticeable. Much in the same way, the initial X-Men comics are not based on gay rights. But soon, gay rights would be lumped into X-Men comics because they are also an oppressed group that is facing issues. The comparisons of these two and these two is an incredibly surface level baseline criticism and acknowledgement of the civil rights movement. Charles was the peaceful, nice one who wanted integration and cooperation, while Eric was the violent, evil one who wanted separation and wanted to keep the divides up. Like, I think the comparison is actually meant to be more of a criticism of Malcolm X than being a praise of Eric. But I also acknowledge this part, both the saddest and most sympathetic reason why people like Magneto. And it's the fact that people are tired. People relate heavily with the themes of the X-Men books. Discrimination for things you can't help, the color of your skin, who you're in love with, the origin of your birth, etc. And despite the fact that we've seen a lot of people like Charles Xavier fight to help the downtrodden over the years, a lot of us don't see much change. Has there been progress? Absolutely. Has there been enough progress? Too many? No. To many, it seems like we're going backwards, and a lot of people suffer in the process, and they get angry, and they look for someone who shares their rage. And Magneto is a character that can very much tap into that anger. There's a really good scene from Mythos #1 where Magneto confronts a bunch of people who killed a 12-year-old mutant girl, and he brings up two other identity-based hate crimes in the Marvel Universe, one of which being an explicit expy of the Matthew Shepard case. And seeing these guys that killed the little girl or Matthew get what they deserve is vindicating in a very primal sense. And Magneto, at the very least, can offer an escapist route for those feelings. Like I said earlier, Magneto is supposed to be the face of the fear of retribution. Since humanity refused to help mutants thus far, they're facing their comeuppance with Magneto. And for that reason, I can't really blame them. This video is more me giving my takes on Magneto with some explanations on why I think some of the positive interpretations might not be the best ideas. If you watch this video and you still like Magneto, I mean, I can't take that away from you. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and click the bell to notify when a future video of mine comes out. And if you want more content from me, consider supporting me on Patreon.